My cousin's long-planned revenge exploded at our family reunion, exposing secrets none of us expected. So this all went down last summer at our big annual family reunion. For context, my cousin Stephen 26M is kind of the black sheep of the family. Not in a bad kid way, more like he's always been the outsider. He's quite sarcastic and keeps to himself. He doesn't really talk to my uncle, his dad, much, and when he does, it's usually tense. Our reunions are a huge deal. My grandparents insist on renting this lake house in upstate New York, so every summer like 30 plus of us cram into this one giant lodge. Picture folding tables full of food, kids running around screaming, aunts gossiping in the kitchen, and my grandpa barking orders at everyone. That's the vibe. Anyway, last year, Stephen showed up with this weird, almost smug look. He had his laptop bag with him, which was odd. Like who brings a laptop to a family reunion where we're supposed to be barbecuing and playing cards? But he was polite enough, greeted everyone, and went straight to the back porch where he usually sits. The day went on as usual. My Aunt Laura was bragging about her son getting into med school. My mom was trying to get everyone to take a big family picture. My uncle Richard, Stephen's dad, was holding court at the grill, talking way too loudly about his successful business deals. At some point, I sat down next to Stephen outside with a beer and asked how he was doing. He smirked and said, "Oh, I'm good, today's going to be interesting." I didn't press him because, honestly, I thought he was just being his usual cryptic stuff. But then dinner came. We were all gathered around, plates full of ribs, potato salad, the works. My grandma asked if someone could put together a slideshow of old family photos she'd brought on a USB stick. She loved showing embarrassing baby pics every year. That's when Stephen volunteered. He casually got up, plugged his laptop into the big TV in the living room, and said, "I got it, Grandma, I'll make sure everyone sees the truth tonight." At first, it was normal baby photos, high school graduations, vacation shots. Everyone was laughing, teasing each other. But then the photos changed. Suddenly, there was a screenshot of a string of emails. Then texts. Then pictures that definitely weren't meant for a family audience. My Aunt Rebecca gasped. My Uncle Richard froze, his face turning pale. The texts were clearly between Richard and some woman who was not his wife. The room went dead silent. My grandma actually dropped her fork. Stephen just leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, letting it play like a movie. He didn't even say a word. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't some accident. He planned this. He used Grandma's request as the perfect setup. His revenge was unfolding right there on a 60-inch screen in front of 30 relatives. Everyone started yelling at once. My Aunt Rebecca, Richard's wife, screamed, "What the hell is this?" My grandpa demanded someone turn it off. My mom was shouting at Stephen, asking what the hell he thought he was doing. But Stephen just said, "The truth's been hiding long enough, thought the family should know who Dad really is." And that's how the reunion turned into absolute chaos. The living room was pure chaos. People were talking over each other. Kids were being ushered upstairs by panicked parents, and my grandma was clutching her chest like she'd just aged 10 years in 30 seconds. The slideshow was still clicking through, showing more texts and even hotel receipts. It was brutal. Finally, my uncle Richard jumped up and yanked the HDMI cord out of the TV. "That's enough," he barked, his face red and sweaty. But it was way too late. The damage was done. Rebecca, his wife, was shaking. She stood there in front of everyone and said, "So it's true, after all these years, it's actually true." Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry, at least not yet. Stephen just took a sip of his soda like he hadn't just nuked the family reunion. "I told you all, he's not who you think he is." At that point, my mom tried to calm things down. "Okay, everyone, maybe we should it." But Rebecca cut her off. No, I want to hear from him. Richard, tell them, tell your kids, tell your parents, tell everyone what you've been doing." Richard tried to deflect. "This isn't the time or the place." And that's when Stephen lost it. He slammed his hand on the table so hard the plates rattled. "When is the time? Dad, you think I don't remember how you treated me? You lied, cheated, and acted like you were this perfect father. You humiliated me every chance you got. Well, guess what? I kept the receipts." The room went dead quiet again. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was personal. This was years of resentment boiling over. My grandpa, who never yells, suddenly snapped, "Richard, is this true?" His voice was low, but it cut through the room like a knife. Richard stammered, "Hey Dad, please, not here." Rebecca finally broke down and started sobbing. She grabbed her keys and stormed out of the house, yelling, "I'm done. I'm done." Asterisk, my cousin Circus, ran after her, crying. Meanwhile, Stephen just stood there watching the fallout, like he'd been waiting for this exact scene to happen. My Aunt Laura whispered to me, "Oh my God, he planned this. He's been sitting on this for months." And she was right. Stephen had been quiet at reunions for years, just sitting in the background. Now it all made sense. He'd been collecting evidence, waiting for the perfect chance to drop the bomb. Richard tried to spin it, of course. "Stephen hacked my emails. He set this up. He's making me look bad." But nobody was buying it. Not after those screenshots. Not after the receipts with his name on them. My grandma was crying by then. She looked at Stephen and whispered, "Why now, honey? Why would you do this to us here?" And Stephen, without missing a beat, said, "Because secrets rot families from the inside. Better to cut out the rot before it spreads." Chills. Literal chills. The rest of the night was absolute hell. People were split, some furious at Stephen for airing it all out like that, others furious at Richard for being a liar. The fun family reunion vibe was completely gone. And I couldn't help but think this was only the beginning. That night after the bombshell, the lake house felt like a battlefield. Dinner was abandoned, half-eaten ribs and spilled drinks still on the table. Nobody touched dessert. People were whispering in corners, choosing sides like it was some family civil war. Rebecca never came back that night. She took her kids and checked into a motel nearby. Richard stayed, sulking in the guest room with the door slammed shut, occasionally shouting through the wall whenever someone tried to knock. I couldn't sleep, so around midnight I went out to the porch. And of course, Stephen was there, sitting with a beer and staring out at the lake like he'd just watched the world burn and was oddly satisfied with the ashes. I sat down next to him. "You really planned all that, didn't you?" I asked. He smirked, not even looking at me. "You think I'd lag around a laptop for fun? Yeah, I planned it. But why here? Why in front of everyone? You could have told Rebecca privately." Stephen finally turned toward me, his face serious. Because that man thrives in the dark. He manipulates, lies, makes everyone believe he's this perfect husband and father. If I told Rebecca alone, he would have trusted it. He always does. No, he needed to be exposed where there's no hiding, no excuse, in front of everyone. I was quiet for a second. This isn't just about the affair, is it? Asterisk. Stephen let out a bitter laugh. Of course it's not. You know how he treated me growing up. I was never good enough. He tear me down in front of everyone. Call me lazy, stupid, a disappointment. Meanwhile, he was sneaking around like some saint in public and a snake in private. I wanted him to feel what I felt, humiliated, cornered, powerless. That hit me. I remembered those reunions where Richard would mock Stephen for not having a real career or for dropping out of college for a while. Stephen would just take it, quiet, but I could see it eating at him. You really think this'll fix anything? I asked. He took a long sip of his beer, then sighed. Not fix, just reveal. The rest is on them. Inside the house, we could still hear muffled arguing. My mom and Laura were trying to calm Grandma down, while my grandpa kept repeating that this family is falling apart. Honestly, he wasn't wrong. The next morning was awkward as hell. Half the family packed up early, saying they didn't want to get involved. Others hung around, gossiping in hushed tones. Rebecca came back only to grab her stuff and leave again. She wouldn't even look Richard in the eye. At breakfast, Richard finally emerged, eyes bloodshot, hair a mess. He looked around the kitchen and sighed. Stephen owes me an apology. Everyone froze. My Aunt Laura literally choked on her coffee. But Stephen, sitting at the counter, just laughed this sharp, humorless laugh. Apology, you ruined your marriage, lied to everyone, and you think I should apologize, that's rich. And that's when my grandpa banged his fist on the table. Enough, this is tearing us apart. Richard, you need to earn what you did. Stephen, you need to understand that revenge has consequences. But Stephen just shook his head. No, Grandpa, lies have consequences. I just turned the lights on. And with that, he stood up and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Richard fuming and the rest of us stunned. It was clear the fallout was only beginning. Later that afternoon, the house felt heavier than ever. The lake was calm, but inside, it was a storm. Richard finally confronted Stephen in the backyard, his face red, veins popping like he was about to blow a fuse. Stephen, this has gone too far, he shouted, hands flailing. You humiliated me in front of the whole family. You had no right. Stephen didn't flinch. He leaned against the railing, arms crossed, calm as if he'd been waiting for this exact outburst for years. No right, Dad. You've been lying for decades, ruining relationships, pretending to be perfect. This isn't about right or wrong anymore, it's about truth. Rich's voice cracked. Truth? You think showing those emails and texts is the truth? You're twisting everything to hurt me. Stephen's expression hardened. Twisting? Dad, I didn't twist anything. You left receipts, emails, photos, literal proof. I just showed it. People deserve to know who you really are. You're still just a child. Richard snapped, stepping closer. I'm your father. You owe me respect. Stephen didn't step back. Respect is earned, not given, and you've spent your whole life abusing the respect everyone gave you, so yeah, I'm done giving it. You want revenge? I just served you your own dish. At that moment, my grandma came up, her hands trembling. Stephen, please, don't stoop to his level. He's your father. You can't. Stephen shook his head. Grandma, I love you, but some truths need to be told. Keeping quiet only lets him keep hurting people. And then, the unexpected revelation hit everyone like a thunderbolt. Stephen pulled out another folder, this one thick, full of documents, screenshots, even recordings. Oh, come on, you didn't. Richard said, panic finally cracking through his arrogance. Oh, I did, Stephen said, voice quiet but deadly. You're not just cheating, Dad. You've been siphoning money from the family business, manipulating contracts, and covering it up for years, and I've been keeping track. Every lie, every sneaky move, you left me a map of your greed. Richard's knees buckled slightly. He grabbed the railing. My Aunt Laura's mouth dropped open, and even my mom, who'd been trying to stay neutral, couldn't hide her shock. Stephen didn't stop. And now the family knows. You won control, power, and admiration. You lost it, and honestly, I feel kind of sorry it took a full-blown reunion to expose you, but better late than never, right? Richard stumbled back speechless. He had nothing to say. The arrogance, the bravado, it was gone. The truth, meticulously gathered and carefully revealed, had stripped him bare. I watched Stephen stand there, eyes blazing but composed, like a man who had finally closed the chapter he'd been forced to endure silently for too long. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice. Even the lake, reflecting the late afternoon sun, seemed to hold its breath. The next morning, the house felt eerily quiet. The usual chaos of our reunions, kids screaming, aunts gossiping, my grandpa shouting was replaced by hushed conversations and tense glances. Fallout from Stephen's double revelation had everyone walking on eggshells. Rebecca had returned late the night before, but she was keeping her distance. My mom and Aunt Laura were whispering in corners, exchanging updates and theories, trying to figure out what everyone was thinking. Richard barely left his room, except to grab food, always with that taunted look on his face. Stephen, on the other hand, was acting like nothing happened. He sat on the porch, drinking coffee, occasionally checking his phone. I found myself joining him, just to understand how he was so calm when the rest of the family was imploding. You really did it, I said, leaning against the railing. Yeah, he replied, taking a long sip. And honestly, feels lighter than I imagined. The weight of holding on to all that for years gone. I shook my head. I don't know if I could ever do what you did, publicly humiliate your dad like that. Stephen shrugged. It wasn't humiliation, it was accountability, and maybe a little revenge. Inside, the family was starting to fracture visibly. Some members were siding with Stephen. Aunt Laura quietly admitted to my mom that she always suspected Richard of shady behaviour, and she was relieved someone finally exposed it. My grandma was conflicted, upset at Stephen for the method, but grateful the truth was out. Others, like my Uncle Greg, were furious at Stephen for turning a reunion into a courtroom drama. He kept muttering, "You don't air family dirty laundry like that, Stephen. Not here, not like this." Even cousins who normally didn't care about family politics were whispering and taking sides. You could see alliances forming, people who felt betrayed by Richard now quietly supporting Stephen's actions. Stephen's revelation had also triggered unexpected conversations. My Aunt Laura confronted Richard about missing money from the family business. My mom dug through all receipts to understand the scale of his manipulation. It was messy, and it was exhausting, but the truth couldn't be ignored anymore. Meanwhile, Stephen didn't gloat. He let the evidence speak for itself. He answered questions calmly, never raising his voice, never losing control. The fact that he'd meticulously documented everything over years gave him undeniable credibility. By late afternoon, the tension was palpable, but contained. Rebecca finally agreed to meet with Richard for no reconciliation, just discussion. Most of the family avoided that room, letting them talk privately. I leaned back on the porch and watched Stephen. "Do you feel satisfied?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Satisfied, maybe, but this isn't about me feeling good. It's about everyone finally seeing him for what he is. That's enough for now." As the sun set over the lake, it was clear that nothing would ever be the same. The reunion had ended, but the aftershocks, broken trust, new alliances, and a family forced to face hard truths were just beginning. And through it all, Stephen remained calm, a quiet force of reckoning, watching the consequences of years of deceit unfold around him. The next day, the tension hit its peak. Stephen insisted on calling a family meeting in the main living room. Everyone gathered reluctantly. Richard slouched in a chair, Rebecca sat stiffly beside her kids, and the rest of us clustered around, unsure what was coming. Stephen stood at the front, his laptop open, but silent this time. His tone was calm but firm. "I asked everyone to come here because there's something we need to settle, not just about the emails, not just about the money, but about accountability. If we let this slide, nothing changes, and I don't think anyone here wants that." Richard's jaw tightened. "Stephen, I've told you already, this isn't your business to broadcast. I am your father." Stephen cut him off sharply. "No, you're not. You're a liar who hid behind authority while hurting the people who trusted you most, and hiding won't work anymore." Aunt Laura finally spoke up, her voice trembling with anger. "Richard, all these years, we trusted you. You've been manipulating everything: finances, relationships, even your own children's perception of you. Enough is enough." Richard's face turned red, veins throbbing. He opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat. The documents Stephen had compiled were airtight, and the family had already seen some of them. No amount of bluster could cover it up. Stephen then dropped the final bombshell. "I've shared everything with Rebecca, she knows. I've made sure the family business records are audited. Every lie you've told is documented, and if you think you can twist this again, I've prepared a copy for every adult in the family." The room went silent. Even my grandparents looked stunned, whispering to each other. Richard finally crumbled. I made mistakes," he said, voice shaking. "I didn't think anyone would find out." "Mistakes?" Stephen's voice was low, cold. "This is more than mistakes. This is betrayal, manipulation, and years of lies, and now everyone knows the truth. That's the consequence." Rebecca's eyes welled up. "Stephen, thank you. I don't know how you managed this, but I'm glad the truth is out." Stephen nodded, but there was no gloating. "I didn't do this for thanks. I did this so the family could decide what to do next. Instead of living in lies, you all have to deal with the truth, and I'll step back now." Some family members clapped quietly, not in celebration, but in acknowledgement of courage. Others just sat in stunned silence. Richard, for once, didn't argue. He had no words, only regret. By evening, the house was quieter than it had ever been during a reunion. Conversations were tentative but honest. People were actually talking about what had happened, and for the first time, I saw Stephen smile softly, not smugly, but with relief. He finally looked at me. "This isn't the end," he said. "But at least now, the truth is permanent." I realized then that Stephen hadn't just planned revenge, he'd orchestrated justice. And in a way, it was beautiful, even if painful for everyone involved. The family reunion was over, but Stephen's revelation had changed the course of our family forever. No more lies. No more secrets. Only the messy, raw truth and the reckoning that followed. Weeks after the reunion, the house and the lake felt strangely quiet. The chaos and shouting had settled into a tense calm. The family was fractured, but the fractures were now exposed, not hidden beneath smiles and false traditions. Stephen had returned home, but his presence lingered in everyone's minds. Even the cousins who had been neutral before now seemed to respect him in a quiet, cautious way. He hadn't bursted or gloated, he had just let the truth speak for itself. And the truth had changed everything. Rebecca had filed for separation officially. She seemed calmer now, no longer carrying the simmering tension that had haunted her for years. The kids stayed with her part-time, but she began to talk more openly about the lies Richard had spun, giving them clarity and protection from his manipulation. Richard, on the other hand, was a shadow of the man he had been. He avoided family gatherings, refused to speak to most of us, and had finally accepted that his secrets had destroyed the trust he once relied on. He was forced to confront not only the affair, but also the mismanagement of the family business, which had been quietly audited thanks to Stephen. Grandma and Grandpa were still struggling to process everything. Grandma was heartbroken that Richard had betrayed not only Rebecca but the family's sense of unity. Grandpa had been furious, but admitted privately to my mum that, in a way, Stephen had done the family a favour, forcing accountability where there had been deception. Stephen, meanwhile, was calm, almost serene. He didn't try to fix things for anyone, he just observed. I remember sitting with him one evening on the porch, the lake reflecting the pink hues of sunset. "So do you feel like it's over?" I asked. He shook his head slightly. "No, nothing like this is ever really over, but at least now, everyone can make their own choices with the truth in front of them. That's all I wanted." "Do you regret anything?" He paused, watching a small boat drift across the lake. "Maybe the timing was extreme, but not exposing him, that would have been worse. Secrets have power to control you. I wanted to break that chain." Over the next few months, family gatherings became quieter but more honest. There were no more forced smiles or fake laughter. People had learned, painfully, that appearances can be deceiving. Stephen didn't force reconciliation, but slowly, some members began to reach out, cautiously rebuilding relationships on a foundation of truth rather than lies. Looking back, I realized Stephen's revenge wasn't about malice, it was about justice, and about reclaiming his voice after years of being silenced. He had turned what could have been bitterness and anger into reckoning that changed the family forever. The reunion, which should have been just another summer tradition, had become a turning point. And Stephen? He'd finally stepped out of the shadows and proven that sometimes the quietest person in the room can have the loudest impact. And even now, months later, the lake house feels different. There's still tension, yes, but also clarity. And the knowledge that, for better or worse, the truth can never be hidden again.